This next session, it is Joe's Augustin. Joe's is the Director of Product Management at Citrix, and we're going to do a deep dive on Citrix Cloud. Is that right, Joe's? Semi-deep, maybe shallow. We don't know. I'll go ahead and give this to you, and away we go.
Thanks, Don. All right, can you hear me, everybody? All right. So I haven't stepped out of my house for the last 3 years, so it's the first time I'm presenting in 3 years in person. So thank you, CUGC, for giving me the opportunity. And anytime I fumble, just blame it on the lack of practice. So I'm Jose Augustin, not Jose. I've been in this country for 10 years, so I started responding to Jose as well, although I don't prefer it. I joke with my wife that she fell in love with Jose and finally got married to Jose. So that's my battle with this country and my name, but I finally come to terms that this is reality. So I'm going to talk about Citrix Cloud, and before I get into what exactly Citrix Cloud, I just want to give you a little bit about myself. A lot of words there. What really matters to you is my life at Citrix. So I've been with the CVAD and DAS team for a little over 4 years now. Based out of the Fort Lauderdale office, again, COVID, I moved to Raleigh because why not? As part of Citrix, I have been associated with the CVAD team. So I was part of the broker team. We ran the Citrix service in the cloud. I was part of a lot of the install upgrade experience. Like those of you remember back in the day, our install was horribly broken. Upgrade was always a mess. I'm not saying it's 100% better now, but at least we made strides into making it better. So I was part of that team as well. Part of delivering Scout, telemetry, supportability, and all those things about CVAD on-prem, which we tried extending into the cloud as well. So as of late last year, I moved into the Citrix Cloud platform team, which is almost like the umbrella or the infrastructure which runs the DAS cloud itself. So that's about me. I just wanted to get a lay of the land here. I mean, this is my first CUGC event, so I don't know who you are. I don't know what kind of people are in this room. So if you can just whip up your phone, go to this URL if you really want to type, or go to the QR code. And just, I'll give you a few more seconds to take a picture of the QR code. And I still see some cameras. And this is my first time trying this service, so let's hope it works. All right, cool. All right, so just a few questions. If you are on that page, Kitty, can you jump to the browser? All right. OK, so that was the first question. So we have 22 people. I definitely see more people here. All right, so most of us are customers. There are some Citrix I don't care about, and then there are partners and some others. OK, cool. All right, moving on to the next question. So what are you? Are you the techie? Are you the guy with the money? Or all right, what is other here? I'm sorry, I should have captured some other category. What is other? Is it a CTP, CTA, or something else? Who chose other? Me, OK, I know about you. Support, OK.
We're a Citrix partner. We help with
Consulting and implementation, OK. OK. All right, a good mix there. Let's move on to the next one. So virtualization or networking or both? OK, a lot of virtualization, which I really like. A little bit of networking, which I don't know much about. All right, good. And so are you on CVAD on-prem? Are you using the cloud? Are you somewhere else? As long as the cloud comes out first, I'm fine. Uh-oh. All right, I just need one more for DAS. Somebody just do a fake vote. Oh, there you go. Okay, all right. And one last one. So I'm guessing since we had 10 people who said they are DAS, there should be at least 10. No pressure. Okay, I mean, this is a very friendly group then. If I have 9 people who responded saying they're live in production, I don't have to convince you about anything. What's the no other reasons? Is it a cost aspect or is it something else? It's cost, okay. Is there anything else, any other creative reasons why we are not doing cloud? Primarily cost, okay. Cool. All right, if you can just switch back to the deck. All right, so before we get started, so I spent a lot of time in DAS, but as I said, I moved over to the platform team now. So within Citrix, we have Citrix Cloud is a combination of a lot of services. So we have a cloud platform team which focuses on the cloud infrastructure. So we are the guys who were responsible for the bad uptimes that we had a few years back, which we have significantly improved now. So we work a lot on the infrastructure side of things. So there is about your onboarding, your partner onboarding, customer onboarding, all those things. When your order messes up, that's us not doing our job. When you're talking about compliance or licensing, that's again us. So we control or we are responsible for the entire licensing experience, how you use the Louis, the licensing usage insight or the cloud licensing. On-prem licensing as well is something which falls under us. I'm also responsible for cloud identity. So your integrations with Azure AD, Okta, SAML, all those things. We have the workspace identity different from the admin entity. We also have FAS, which falls under us. I don't know, I'm sure most of you are using FAS because that seems to be the trend with most of our cloud customers. And then the last piece is the on-prem connectivity piece. So how do you as a customer connect your on-prem infrastructure to the cloud? So there are 2 distinct technologies, and I'll focus on the connector appliance in one of the slides, or a few of the slides, but we own the Windows Cloud Connector as well as the connector appliance. So those are the 2 big pieces of work that we own on our side. So in this presentation, I have a few slides. If you have a question, if you want to call BS on anything, please just raise your hand, and I'll make sure that you don't get a chance to speak. But if you want to make it more interactive, if you want to talk about it, I'm happy to answer questions as we go along. So I'm going to focus on all the different things that we mentioned there. So from the lay of the land is we're going to talk about some things which we already released and some things which is coming out in the next, I can't talk about a date, so in the next few weeks, months, quarters, it should be out soon. So system log. So when we started implementing Citrix Cloud, this was one of the #1 issues that we had, especially with larger customers, security-sensitive customers, healthcare customers. There is no logging that was available on the transactions that happen in Citrix Cloud. So we have introduced the system logs. This was done a few months back now. So it basically does, what it does is it complements what we have with the DAS config logging. So DAS already had a very good config logging mechanism. We added Citrix Cloud System Logs, which basically does the same thing as what DAS does. It tracks every activity on the Citrix Cloud itself, and we try to capture that and put it down as a date time-stamped event in our console. It is joint ownership, and that's important to understand. We don't store history forever. We store 90 days of history. The idea is that as a customer, you can extract it using an API, using a Splunk add-on, using in-console exports or whatever it is. But you can export it and you can capture it, you can store it for long-term consumption. We store it for 90 days. If you have requirements which need it for 2 years, you can do that on your side. We have added events as we go along. but I know that there are still other events which we have a roadmap for in terms of adding. If you're already using system logs, there is an event out there which is not tracked, which your security team doesn't like and wants it to be tracked. Let us know. That's something that we are focused on. We will add it onto our roadmap very soon. Again, so one of the typical questions that we get is, why Splunk? Why not anything else? And the reason is Splunk was our most commonly used. When we reached out to our customers, our larger customers, and Splunk was the one which was most commonly used, that's why we chose Splunk. Doesn't mean that we are not going to open it for others. We have other partnerships also which we are working with. But in the interim, till we have anything else, we always have the REST API. So if you have, let's say, a Logit or a log analyzer or some other SEM tool that you're using, and if you want to integrate that, you can use that with the REST API. This is a feature which is coming out soon, which is allowing non-Citrix admins to get email notifications. So today, what happens is anybody who has, like we see in our typical deployment, we see like for example, a customer that I was working with, they have an Azure team, which is completely independent of the Citrix team. And the Azure team wants to know if a connector is up or if a resource location is down. They are not Citrix admins. They don't need access to Citrix, except that they have to come into the console and see these alerts. Or for example, if you have a DL, if you have a distribution list which has a lot of your ops people who should be knowing about certain events. So we are adding the ability for you to add just single email addresses or distribution lists or whatever the case may be as contacts for notifications. So any alerts that are triggered by Citrix Cloud, they will also, depending on how you configure it, they can get everything or they can get a subset of it, and they can also be part of that administrative layer without actually having access to Citrix Cloud. And this, I think, is typical of larger implementations where you have that distinct role separation between the different teams. We are also working, so DAS was way ahead of this. Like DAS, our entire console, the entire DAS managed console, was built with the intent that any transaction that's possible in the DAS console should also be available externally to our customers and partners. So every transaction that you can do inside of your managed console, there is a way that a customer or a partner can use our APIs to automate it. So DAS was way ahead of the curve in that. Citrix Cloud was not so, I would say, proactive with providing customer level APIs. And that's something that we are working on. So our first cut here was expanding on the licensing APIs. So we have every transaction that you can, every transaction or any data that you can see inside of the consoles, inside of the Citrix Cloud console is now available within as a RESTful API. So you can export that data. You can. I have seen larger customers who try to merge their on-prem and cloud usage together. There are people who do reporting out of, there's a customer who does their Citrix reporting along with their Epic reporting in Tableau and stuff. So the data is available for you. You can extract it. You can consume it as possible. The other licensing update is on the cloud. There has been times when I talk to customers and they say that we just make it very difficult to manage licenses. And no, that's good. That's honest. You can now leave the room. No, just joking. We had made it very difficult. That was not an intentional decision. I think the thing is we did not make it easy. We just did the bare minimum that was required to get us out of the door. It was not an intentional thing that we wanted to make it difficult. But now intentionally we are trying to make it a little easier. So there are a few things that are already out there, a few things which will come next year, but I'm not at liberty to talk about roadmap at this point. But just from a license release perspective, something as simple as license release was very complicated in our older console. So we have, a very small, there's just a checkbox, a very small enhancement, but I know a lot of customers who were really appreciative of it. So you can, with a single click, you can figure out who are the customers who are eligible for their licenses to be released, and then another click, and then you can release all those licenses. So as a CSP or as a, I know CSPs ask about this all the time, but also as a larger customer, this is something which would really help your continuing to maintain the compliance piece of it. This was not only done as a console, but also at the RESTful API. So if you have automation that you want to go in and you want to release those licenses on a cadence, and if you want to build that automation, you have the tool set needed to do that. So just the automation piece is very important for us because as we see customers getting more and more, like we have several thousand customers now who are on Citrix Cloud and DAS. So as we see more and more customers deploying on the cloud, we see more and more the need for providing automation and avenues for automation. So the REST API that you see here, this is going to be a common trend. Like anything that we do going forward will have a alternate on the API side for customers who want to consume their own. They don't like the console, they hate the blue or the teal color that we have. They want to build their own, they will have the option to do that. Not just on the customer side, but also on the partner side, like EG Innovations or somebody. If they want to build another automation on top of what we already have, there will be avenues for that. Shane. So the license release rules have not changed. You still have to wait for 30 days. What we are allowing is the ability to do that on a recurring basis, on a rolling basis. I think he needs a mic. I think he said that's awesome. Whenever you have good things to say, just let me know. I'll pass the mic along. All right, so another thing, customers who are using concurrent licensing, we're almost flying in the blind today. So you're using concurrent licensing, you have concurrent users, you have devices. There is no visibility into what user is using it, how many concurrent users or devices you have, et cetera. So that's something which is in the works. It should come out within the end of the year, is giving you the ability to see who those concurrent users are. So you have, in this example, you have 122 devices which are licensed or consuming a license. You can drill down and you can see who those 122 users are. Eventually, sometime next year, what we want to do is we want to get into, we have a lot of customers who are doing hybrid deployments. Like they are completely 100% on-prem, they're moving to the cloud, but we all know it's not an overnight journey. It's not a turn off there, turn it on here. So there is going to be a period where you will be deployed at the same time in your cloud as well as with your on-prem. So how do you reconcile the licenses? Today, there is no good mechanism to do that. So next year, sometime we want to get into how do we reconcile, how do we bring those consumptions together to give you one single view into everything that's Citrix DAS licensing. Compliance. So we did a ton of work with our compliance partners in the last couple of quarters now. So on the left-hand side is stuff that I already have, which I'm guessing you already know. But the big one amongst that was the FedRAMP compliance that we got. So we now have Citrix government deployment, which is FedRAMP moderate certified. So if you have a government customer, I think Dwayne talked about it at some point. So if you have a government customer who needs to be deployed on, or if you have regulatory needs which require you to be deployed on a FedRAMP certified or approved environment, you have that in Citrix Cloud. What we are working towards is to get to PCI compliance early next year. So that's something which is in progress now. We are working with our auditors to get to a PCI certified state. So just to set the stage, so that includes Citrix Cloud, the platform, as well as DAS. So what we want to get is early next year, if you are a retail customer who is waiting to get PCI certification for you to, let's say, do your point of sale machines, that's something that will get addressed very soon next year. All right, moving on to identity. So this is, for lack of a better word, this is a hot mess because there are so many identity providers, there are so many different customers with unique needs that it is difficult for us to keep up with everything that's happening. So there are a couple of different things, a couple of different updates that we have, which I'll share, but also some strategic things that is changing for us, I mean, in terms of the way we support different identities. So Google Identity, we are in tech preview. We are planning to roll this out in GA within the next couple of months, or before the end of the year is our target. So if you have Google Identity configured, and when I'm talking about Google Identity, I'm talking about Google Workspace Identity, not your Gmail account. So if you are a Google customer, you have a Google Workspace Identity, you can log in with that directly into the workspace. That can happen today. So if you look at the screen here, so I mean, the end user goes to Citrix Workspace, and they are directly redirected into the Google Cloud login page. And we do support domain joined as well as non-domain joined VDAs with Google Identity. And there's a nice matrix on our documentation page which shows what is supported when and so on and so forth. What we are also doing is we are investing more on the SAML side of things. So we have native integrations with Google. We have native integration with Okta and with Azure AD. So those were all done specifically purpose-built integrations which only work for them. But that is, like as I said, there are so many identity providers that it's hard for us to keep up. Like if tomorrow, if one login there's a customer who is using one login, we at Citrix, we don't want to be in a position where a customer has one login deployed and we are running behind because we don't have a native integration with one login. So our approach to that is to go behind a generic SAML integration. So all identity providers support SAML, at least all the ones that I know. Most of these identity providers support SAML. So what we're going to do is we already introduced the SAML group support, SAML-backed AD group support, but we're going to extend it to SAML-backed end users as well. So what this means is tomorrow if you have, like these are the list of vendors that we have. They are quote unquote the Citrix ready vendors, but if you have any identity provider who is SAML compliant, and most of them are, you don't have to have special integration with Citrix. You can consume the generic SAML integration that we have, and that identity can be onboarded. So that can be done for your workspace. That can also be done for your admin population. So, and this, I think this comes into context more because what we have realized is when we look at each and every geography in Citrix, like every country, like there is a different vendor out there who is, let's say, predominant in Europe, or there's another one who is very prevalent in Middle East. So there are different vendors, and as I said, it's difficult for us to keep up. So this is our approach. We're going to invest more to make SAML as robust as possible. We will still have the 3 first-party integrations with Azure AD, with Okta, and with Google Identity, but we'll continue to invest more on the SAML side of things to make it more generic. So bring your own identity. Citrix will be ready for you. Can you just go back to the previous slide? Thank you. All right. So another thing. So if you are a large deployment, administering identity on Citrix Cloud can become a pain. So one of the first things that we did last year was to introduce group support for Azure AD, and we followed that up this year with group support for SAML. So if you have a bunch of help desk admins, you don't have to onboard them separately. 2 years back, we made a customer onboard 200 of their admins separately, and it was a nightmare to manage because help desk admins move, and it's a revolving door. So it's very difficult to keep up. So with the group administration, especially around the help desk, DAS help desk side of things, you have a solution today. You can deploy them as groups. You can natively add an Azure AD group, or you can add a SAML group directly into an AD group directly into Citrix Cloud to manage. So the group support is not at its best. So it supports DAS, it supports VEM, it also supports ADM now. So there are those 3 services that we support. But if you're a customer who's going beyond, like for example, if you have CAS, or if you are using some other, let's say Content Collab or anything, if you're using some other services, group support is not ready for that. So if you are a customer who's primarily focused on DAS, group support has most of what is required. We are working on adding the platform general functions, and that's coming out within this year again. So the idea is by the end of this year, if you are a DAS customer, you can manage your entire Citrix footprint or your Citrix identity using groups. You don't have to do single admins at all. You might want to do single admins for break glass or those kind of use cases, but you don't have to. We are also simplifying how the RBAC controls are laid out. So the screenshot that Shane had shared in the morning where he had the RBAC, the entire long list of RBAC roles which were laid out, it's a nightmare to manage, especially because I've worked with customers who have, or partners who have 100 different custom scopes, 100 different custom roles. So the way the UI is laid out today is if you have that, you will be shown 1,000 lines to pick from. which is impossible, not practical, and it breaks very frequently. So what we're doing is we are moving it, although it looks like a very small change in the UI itself, but from a backend perspective, this is a big, like the way DAS interacts with the Citrix Cloud platform and vice versa is completely changed with that. So if you look at it on the left-hand side is the current screenshot, so where you have all the different delivery group administrators listed separately. So instead of that, we are going into a single row per role. So you just have to select the scopes and then go from there. So this will simplify the page that's there. It will simplify from a configuration perspective how you're making those choices, especially if you're a CSP, if you're a partner who is doing multi-tenant DAS, it can be a pain to manage what we have today. So this, again, is something which is this is not a mock-up, this is an actual screenshot from an environment. So we are almost done with development, so this should be coming out very soon. All right, so focusing on on-prem connectivity, and this is something which, as a strategy. So let me take a few steps back. So when we did Citrix Cloud in our first cut, we did Windows connectors. So our cloud connectors, everything was Windows-based. It served us a purpose. We were able to get things out very quickly. We had customers consume it quickly, but Windows also comes with the management overhead. So there is the Windows stack, so you have to have your Windows licensing. You have to have your patch Tuesdays and all those patches correctly applied, and it becomes difficult to manage. The problem became aggravated because when customers are doing larger resource locations, so you have a resource location with, let's say, 100 VMs, 100 VDAs, you need 2 connectors. But if you have a resource location with 5,000 VDAs, you might want 3, 4, or 5, or 6 different connectors depending on how you have configured your traffic. So with all that, basically what happens is your total cost of ownership, the entire solution becomes expensive because of the Windows connecting sitting there. So the way we are handling this is that we are progressively moving slowly towards providing customers with an appliance. So Connector Appliance is an appliance, it's a Linux-based appliance, which will eventually replace Windows Connector. I don't know when that eventually will happen, but we are progressively adding more use cases as we go along. So there are a couple of very key advantages for you. So from a cost perspective, it's an appliance, it's a Linux appliance, so if you directly take away from a management perspective, you don't have to take care of the patches and everything. There is no Windows license that's involved. It also is, by default, it is also very lean. So it requires less resources. The same resources between a Windows connector and a connector appliance are very different. From a reliability perspective, there is also, just from the way we have tooled it internally, it's also a very faster release cycle. It's much more reliable in terms of upgrades. So we run into this internally, like on the cloud connector, Citrix is the one which is managing your cloud connectors. And there are things about Windows operating system which doesn't lend to perfect results every single time that we try to do an upgrade. So with the cloud connector, with the managed appliance that we have a lot more control over it, and it makes upgrades a lot more reliable, resilient, and predictable. The third one, and this is something that I think your security teams will love, is that from a security perspective, it's a black box. So from a security perspective, you have deployed a connector appliance. You don't have access to the connector appliance. You just have deployed it on your network. It only does outbound connections, and it doesn't have access to any of your network. It's not domain joined. It doesn't have access to any of your network or anything as well. So from a security perspective, the footprint is very, very low, easier to get approvals from and all those things. Today, we have 3 different use cases which we support. So there is a SPA. So if you are using secure private access today, you need connector appliance. If you're using image portability service, that's tied to connector appliance. If you look at Zen Server, I did not use Citrix Hypervisor. We are going back to the term Zen Server. If you are using Zen Server, then the Zen Server Cloud is based on connector appliance. So if you notice, all those were 3 new use cases or new opportunities that opened for Citrix opened, and all of them are based on the connector appliance. So anything net new is going to come on the connector appliance. That's our vision. And progressively, we will move existing use cases as well to the connector appliance. Anybody in this room who is already using the appliance? Okay, all right. Has it been a good experience? If it's not, then just don't say anything, but it's been a, see, Shane, I love you, Shane, thank you. For SPA, okay, yeah. So with that, we also want to make Connector Appliance extremely accessible. So it is available wherever you are deployed. So on the left-hand side are all the platforms that we support today. So you're on Nutanix, you're on Hyper-V, whatever the case may be, we have a deployment which is available for you. To make it easier, we are also extending it directly into the marketplaces. So we are on the Azure Marketplace, we are on the AWS Marketplace. Very soon, we are coming to the Google Marketplace also. So if you're a public cloud customer, if you're using any of these 3 marketplaces, you don't have to start from Citrix. You can just go there, search for the image. The image is available. You can directly deploy it from there. So one of the first DaaS use cases that we solved for very recently with the Connector Appliance was the multi-forest Active Directory support, specifically for users. So in the current Windows connector, if you are a larger deployment with multiple domains, you have to maintain two connectors per domain. So if you're a customer like us, this large insurance provider that I have referenced here, they were a global deployment. So they had offices in US, they had offices in Europe, in Asia Pac, et cetera, and all the users were on a different domain. So what practically happened is they had to deploy 2 different connectors for every domain that they had, 2 or more. So this particular customer had 39 Windows connectors deployed for their DaaS footprint. And this is outside of their machine domains and whatever. So I'm not talking about the machine domains at all. I'm focused on the user domain. And what happened with the fact that once we released this multi-domain support is that they were able to reduce their footprint from 39 Windows connectors down to 6 cloud connector appliances. So that was a significant, just the number of devices are reduced, but there's also the fact that they are connector appliances lends you to cost savings, making it easier for upgrade and all those things. Within Citrix also, so we dogfood our own solution. So within Citrix also, every Citrite accesses our workspace. We were deployed with 17 Windows connectors at one point, and now we have come down to just 2 connector appliances. So if you are a Windows connector user today, you don't have to wait for connector appliance to be 100% ready. There are incremental use cases that we will introduce which will help you reduce your footprint or at least optimize what you already have. Like for example, if you have multiple user domains, this is something which is available today which you can make use of. Our next path here is to do multi-forest AD support for machines. So that's what we are working on at this point, but it's a longer development cycle with that, so I don't have a timeline in terms of when that is, but that's something which we are looking at next. Advanced health check, so just like Windows connector, as I said, we are porting everything or we're making it better on the connector appliance with the eventual goal that connector appliance will be the one which becomes a primary or go-to. We won't get rid of the Windows connector. Windows connector will still be around, but our primary, we will lead with the connector appliance. So there is a health check that we added to the connector appliance. So there is a periodic check which goes in, looks at the RAM, the memory, and all those things, and there is alerting also which is built into it. So if you are a Citrix Cloud customer, you will get an alert in the console here, and if you use the first feature that I talked about, where you can let's say your connector appliances are maintained by some other team, they can also get alerted directly from the console itself. All right, one last slide. So we also, just given the nature of how Citrix operates, every single team is constantly working on new features. We are constantly looking at releasing new features, and everybody has their own cadence of release. So from a customer perspective and a partner perspective, it becomes very, very difficult to keep track of what is there. Like a lot of times I talk to customers who don't realize that we had released a feature. Like they come to us and they say, I wish if there was this one feature, it would have made my life so much more easier. And when we get in details, we realize that we've already released it a few months back. So there is no easy mechanism in Citrix which can help you get that overall picture in terms of across all the different teams that are there. And from a customer perspective, you should not care how many teams are there within Citrix. What you care about is what is the value that I'm getting. And that's what we try to do with this page here. It's called updates.cloud.com. We call it Cloud Updates now. So this is the single source to know about multiple services. So today you have, like, if you're a DaaS customer, you go into DaaS, what's new. If you're using session recording, you have to go into session recording, what's new. And you have to piece together all these bits and pieces of information to figure out what actually happened and when. The other piece of feedback that we get is in Citrix Cloud, we are constantly doing releasing new code, releasing new features, and customers don't know when something is releasing. Like we only tell the world that it's done once it's already released. So another piece of, if you can, I don't know if you can follow this, the screenshot here, but the piece that I've highlighted is what will happen going forward is that anything which is starting its release, so once it's on the release train, once it's getting out into the world, there will be features marked as releasing in here. So if you see a peculiar behavior which you thought should not happen, you would be able to go into this console, see the status here. So you can see that there is a feature which is releasing, which is related to what you're seeing, and then you will be more educated or work with support or whatever the case may be. So the question was, when will we get down to a tenant level specific information here? So the long and short is we started with that as our goal, but the way, I mean, and this is not just Citrix, any cloud provider has the same challenges. We have, like for example, I own Citrix Cloud Identity. We have a release in Identity which is happening every 15 minutes. Every 15 minutes there is a change which is going out to all production customers. We are a CI/CD pipeline. It is very difficult and very difficult to give a view for that to the customer because of so many. Like for example, we look on-prem. So on-prem, the delivery controller. So we think about it as a monolith, so delivery controller has come in. On the cloud, the delivery controller is in turn built by maybe 40 or 60 different microservices which are having their own release cycles. So it's very, very difficult to give that view. That's part of our goal. We want to get there. I don't have a convincing answer today, but that's our goal. That's how we started it. This is our first cut at it, but eventually I want to get there where we can predict that. Another very cool part of the way we built it is that there is an option in every single item to give you for you to give us feedback. So the idea was not just to tell you about what's already happened, so what's already released. We wanted to tell you about what's hitting your tenants, so what is in the pipeline, and also give you a view of what is coming up. So all these updates that I talked about today, if you go to cloud updates, they all should be listed there as in development. The moment it comes to in development, we have made significant progress, and we know it is getting out. From a product perspective, I know what it is going to be. I'm not able to give you a clear, concise timeline, but I know the details enough to put it up here. So anytime you're interested in just knowing about the roadmap, what are we working on, that's the page to see. Just filter on the in development, you'll be able to see everything across different components. There's also inside of every article, there is a way to send feedback back to us, and that is going back directly to the product. So I would highly encourage, like if you are interested in a feature, you see a description here, it's in development, you don't agree to it, you like it, or like it is fine, but if you don't agree to it, and if there is feedback that you want to give, this is the way to influence the product lifecycle, because you have an opportunity to reach back to the product team about a feature that is still being built, and there is an opportunity to influence that. That's my time. So my email address, hit me up on LinkedIn if you have any more questions, or we can do a Q&A now if we have some time. Yeah, we have some time, yeah.
So within the identity plane, there is an option to configure different APIs. So where you can make calls from your on-prem servers to the Citrix Cloud. And based on the ID, which API was generated, whenever you make any query or anything related to it, you would only see the ID of the person who created the API, or how that API secret was created. But those actual operations are being performed by a different support associate. So means I have raised this concern several times, and I have not seen any update on that yet. But just looking forward to it, if there will be an option to see the actual identity of the person performing the operation, rather than the API, rather than the ID who created the API, basically.
So you're talking about the secure client and the way it is. The app secret, okay. So again, I can be completely candid. The way secure client is today, it's not sustainable. It is not something which is enterprise ready. So we have, like for the folks who are not familiar with it, so you can log in as a user, and you can create a secure client, which is what is used for automation. But the way it's hooked up is that it is tied to the user who's creating it. So if I create one and I win a lottery and I'm no longer with Citrix, all the integrations that I had might get broken because it's tied to my ID. So the long and short answer of that is there is work in progress to get out of secure clients. So we are working on, just similar to what Azure has secure service principals. So we're working on a similar motion. Unfortunately, it's not easy to implement service principles. We have the work going on at least for the last 3 months now. So we have a team which is dedicated on it. So I don't have a time, but the goal is that we will completely get out of secure client sometime next year. So we'll give you an option for service principals. You will have an option to do that completely outside of the user context. So it's up to you how you decide who gets access to what and so on. So that's the long-term path for us. I don't have a timeline at this point, but keep looking at that, not this page, the previous page, and you will know. The fact that that feature is not listed on this page means that we are still early in our development cycle. So only once we are a little ahead do we put it up on that page. Any other questions? I must be good.
All right, cool. Well, thank you. If you want to take it back to Automai. Thanks, Dr. Jose. I was definitely happy to see that there's so many Citrix Cloud customers and on-prem.